Hey guys, good Monday morning. Welcome back to our Day 7 video lecture over the 1960s. A little overview for the week. This week we will be finishing up the 1960s. We have today and tomorrow's video lectures, and then we will be jumping into Vietnam by the end of the week. So your last video lecture this week will be over the Vietnam War. So we're kind of transitioning from early 60s, mid 60s into mid to late 60s and an international conflict with the United States later in the week with the Vietnam War. But let's go ahead and get started today. Hopefully everyone's ready to go for this week with our Monday video lecture over the 1960s. And we're going to be continuing President Johnson. All right, and we're going to look at different areas of President Johnson's presidency, and we're going to look specifically at what he's doing maybe with some different groups. We're also going to look at some Supreme Court cases today that President Johnson oversaw during his tenure in office. So let's first start with immigration. Get your notes out and get to opening doors for immigrants and preserving the environment. So two areas that Johnson really wanted to focus on was helping immigrants and also helping our Environmental Protection Agency. Johnson supported a major overhaul of the nation's immigration service. The old way was the quota system. So if you guys think back to Ellis Island and Angel Island at the beginning of the year, we talked about quotas and only allowing so many immigrants into the country. And this continued through World War II. That was more so because of the quote-unquote enemies that were coming from other countries, especially like Japan, Germany, and Italy. But he wants to get rid of this quota system. Johnson believed the quota system was rooted in prejudice and wanted to end it because, as we've seen before with like the Chinese Exclusion Act, it singles out a specific group of people from a specific country, where you're really limiting or hindering the number of immigrants from that area, and more than likely it's because of prejudice. There's nothing else. It's not like they are a true threat to our country. But it's because we have a prejudice against those people or the country that they live in. So he passes the Immigration Act in 1965. And remember, Johnson passes a lot of bills through Congress because he works really well with Congress. He used to be one of them. In this Immigration Act, it eliminated the old quotas based on national origin and now allowed people to come into the United States without having a certain set number from one particular area. People's skills and ties to family in the United States are the key criteria for admission. So we're looking to get people into the United States that are going to help our country, are going to benefit our country. We're not just looking to let people in and just allow them to be here. Once they're here, we want them to bring with them skills and traits and make sure they have family here to help them. Again, going back to that immigration unit we did at the beginning of the year, so many immigrants were first-time immigrants to the United States back then that they struggled. So they went to like settlement houses or they looked for political bosses. Now, if you have family in the United States, it makes it easier for you to have that transition and for you to Americanize. Johnson also hoped to improve the quality of the environment for all people. The Clean Air Act in 1963 set emission standards for factories to reduce air pollution, and other laws focused on cleaning up waterways, preserving wilderness, and protecting endangered species. So Johnson looked at the environment and looked at all aspects in the environment to help. So regulating hunting on certain animals that are becoming endangered, making sure we're preserving our national forests, our national parks, cleaning up the waterways, the streams, the rivers, and also cleaning up the air around the factories because in the 1960s we are still a major producing country, so there's a lot of pollutants getting put out into the air. He also wants to protect consumers. So not only is he working on the industry and people coming into the country, he's also protecting the people that are doing all the buying in the country. The Cigarette Labeling Act of 1965 is passed. This required cigarette packages to carry label warnings that smoking could cause health problems. And so you see early in the 60s, we're starting to identify these problems that are associated with smoking and secondhand smoke. Today, you guys, this is very relatable with, Juuls and vapes. You see the same thing that's being labeled on that, and that's why Congress and state legislatures are trying to pass tobacco laws to make it 21, just like alcohol. It used to be 18, but they see that you're still a developing minor child. You're still easily influenced in your decisions. At 21, you're more classified as an adult, and so you can make those decisions based on yourself and your own health. But the Surgeon General in the United States puts that warning on all labels, so you are made aware of the possible health risks that you are assuming by doing this product. Other acts set standard for wholesome meat and poultry products to make sure the food that we are consuming is healthy. This goes all the way back to like the progressives and the jungle and the FDA and what they were trying to accomplish. He's just going to take it a step further. Congress is to pass the National Traffic and Motor Vehicle Safety Act of 1966. This law required automakers to install seatbelts in cars. So you got to think, we didn't have seatbelts in the first cars from the late 1920s all the way up into the mid-1960s. So if there was an auto accident, a lot of times people were killed. Now, in the 1960s, we started installing these seatbelts, and seatbelts really started as lap belts that went across. Later, you get the harness that goes across with the lap belt to restrict your forward body movement for the airbags and things like that. But it's going to make it safer to drive, okay? Today, obviously, you guys all know the slogan, click it or ticket, and that's obviously being enforced because we want people to wear the seatbelts while they are in cars because it is for their protection, all right? Sometimes it's uncomfortable, things like that, but it can help you if you are in an auto accident, obviously restraining you from something bad happening. Johnson also supported consumerism. Consumerism is the protection of the rights of the consumer, and so he wants to help the people that are going out and buying. He wants to help them from unfair practices by businesses, price gouging, and he wants to make sure that he allows the market to be dictated by the consumer. He wants to make everything available. He wants to help the consumer as much as he can. So, debating the Great Society, the society that was, started kind of during Kennedy's presidency, but really carried out during Johnson's. Was it a great society? By the early 1970s, the impact of Johnson's Great Society reforms could be seen in many areas of life. Poverty, he had the war on poverty, right? Went from 22.2% in 1960 to 12.6% in 1970. So he was obviously very successful in that war on poverty. We see a 10% decline in the impoverished amount of people in the United States. High school graduation rates were rising. African Americans, 60% are now graduating high school, which means of those, you're probably seeing 45 to 50% going to college. So you're seeing an increase then in higher education, more education, better jobs. For white students, that's 80%. Obviously it's much higher for both groups today, but you're going to see enrollment in colleges increase, and that's when we're really going to see the transformation in the United States in the 70s and 80s from a blue-collar to a white-collar society. Why? Because they're getting more education, and this education is taking them more towards the service sector rather than the manual labor, blue-collar jobs. Because, students before weren't completing high school, and then they were going into these manual labor jobs, factory jobs, and they're more blue-collar. And now that they're completing school and getting more of a formal education and a higher education, they can then go to different routes career-wise that aren't manual labor jobs or factory jobs. African American participation in politics was also growing. The Great Society, though, did have its critics. The left wing wanted more money to the poor and creation of jobs to help them. So those are kind of your extreme left-wing people. The right wing then said people were becoming dependent on the government funds. We're just looking for handouts. Remember, Johnson's kind of that moderate. He's right there in the middle. So most Americans believe that the Great Society is doing its job and that he's doing a good job as president. But the far left in his party are saying, no, we need to do more. We need to give them more money. We need to help those that are unemployed and are jobless and are homeless. Then you had the people on the far right that were saying, well, we need to cut all spending. Why are we carrying people? It should be up to the people to help themselves. And so there's no real clear answer. But for a majority of Americans in the middle, Johnson's doing a great job, and they believe in the Great Society. But remember, the Great Society is not finished. As Johnson said, the Great Society is something that's going to continue to be great through time. It's not like a question that we can answer in the 1960s. We have to see what the 70s are like, the 80s, the 90s, and then into the 2000s to determine whether our society is truly great. Johnson's presidency proved to be a high point for the liberal view of government as society's problem solver. After Johnson, you go through some Republican presidents, and then you get to another Democratic president who doesn't live up to Johnson. For a lot of Democrats, Jimmy Carter. And he does help the American people, but not in the same way, same fashion as what Johnson did. So every Democratic president after Johnson is kind of viewed as, how can they be Johnson-esque? How can they help the American people and create all these reforms? President Obama was pretty close to being Johnson-esque with creating a lot of national programs like the Obamacare, and the government bailouts that were given to different companies. So he was more in line with what Johnson did, but we haven't seen a true Johnson president in a long time. So, ensuring one person, one vote. So what we're going to do here, guys, is we're actually going to stop, and we're going to, I don't have much time left in this video, so we're going to get into some Supreme Court cases, into our video lecture part 2 for today. So stay tuned, and we're going to talk about the Supreme Court. We got about 6 or 7 cases that we need to get to that are very important. Okay? So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Enjoy these commercials.